All right, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5. I think this is episode 5 of the No Starving Artist podcast. Um, this podcast is dedicated to all different types of artists, but specifically dancers looking to kind of take the leap to the next level or looking to kind of break into whatever industry or next step there is for you. We talk to people that are in all different facets of dance, whether it comes to behind the scenes or in the scenes. And today we have a really, really amazing artist, human person that I have known personally for a really long time, Jesse Sykes. Uh, the audience claps for the introduction. And so Jesse, give us like a elevator. Someone says, "What do you do?" What would you tell them?
Oh man, what a loaded question. Um, it's at that point right now in my career as an artist that I feel as if the best description for what I do is I'm a facilitator through a movement modality that allows me to help others find authenticity.
Mm,
And then that would probably start a conversation, which is what I'm
yep.
going for at this
Yep.
point in my life. So
And the
ears
thing
would
is
perk.
like when you sent me, that was the first time I sent somebody a form, by the way. So we're getting
Oh,
more and more
nice.
official.
I like that. I
But
like that a lot.
when I read it back and I saw like what you put as whatever my question was, like who are you or what are you? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was perfect because I feel like the older you get and the more you like dive into your craft, the more
Mhm.
you realize that it's impossible to just be like one thing, you know? And it's
Yes.
like, and I think that's the goal is like the more you learn, hopefully the more you're adding to that kind of like arsenal of
Mm,
what you can offer to people. Um,
100%.
but okay, let's jump back to this what we were talking about right before we started, which is where give me kind of like because you I watch from a distance, I feel like at this point, as I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
us do here in Utah that know you. Um, where are you at now? And like what is the next like where are you going? Or do you know where you're going?
Mm, interesting. Well, currently, like geographically, I just relocated to Las Vegas. And the big purpose behind that was to be somewhere where I can immerse myself as a professional artist. Um,
Mm,
the transition from Utah down to Vegas made a lot of sense for me currently, just because I am looking to be a little more stationary. Over the last few years, I've had the blessing and opportunity to travel a lot and teach overseas, teach here in the States, judge, and traveling really just kind of like gets to that point to where it's like, okay, this is like you just said, this is like sort of one of the facets of,
mm,
who you become, right? Traveling is a immense experience in itself, but I knew I was seeking a space that I could call home that also helped me, I guess, manage and create a sense of balance between traveling and working here actually in the States. The trajectory currently is really interesting because this year specifically, I've been traveling over to Europe, specifically going there to teach and to judge. Um, and through that, I'm like, okay, is this part of the path? Am I going to be
mm,
like an international traveler for the next few years to really gain that experience and bring it back home, but
right.
also spread what we create here and hopefully give people a lens, excuse me, into our world here in the
Right.
States. So I think my trajectory honestly is getting bigger, which is a really cool space to be in. I just turned 30 and I'm trying to find a deeper sense of purpose in the work that I'm doing.
Mm,
And with that being said, it's manifested quite some unreal spaces for me.
mm,
Um, so there's like a 50-50 here. Like I know my trajectory is for the next few years is going to be here stationed in Vegas, working potentially shows, gigs, that kind of thing.
mhm,
Part of it's also traveling still and continuing to learn through that experience and be a student of life through that experience. And then part of it is unknown, which is really, really beautiful because I
yeah.
think I'm at that point of surrender where I'm just kind of like, look, I've put in a lot of like very meticulous work. I've been very tenacious throughout this entire career of mine.
Mhm,
So now I believe that I'm in a season of receiving uh, a lot more than I ever could fathom. So that's where that, like, I guess that unknown comes in. It's like, okay, you've done the work. Now you get to kind of like reap the benefits of it all.
Yeah.
And ultimately me channeling that to continue to serve more people so that way
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
continue to push that outward, right?
Yeah. I love that. That's so sick, man. And I feel like it's just so cool. And I just feel like it's like I don't know, it's enjoyable to watch people's journey and like enjoyable to see kind of the choices that other people make.
Mhm.
Um and to see like the similarities and the differences. You
True.
know what I mean? Because it's like I feel like as humans and artists we're always like comparing in a sense. And I feel like there's just as much value to finding what's not comparable as there is
True.
to finding
True.
what's comparable, you know?
Mhm.
But that's dope. Any shows that you have your eyes on?
Man, see, I'm getting to that point too where I'm like, all right, I also need benefits, and that's a whole other conversation, right?
Ooh,
It's like, man, as far as a dancer looking to create
yes,
longevity
yes, yes,
within their
yes,
art, I
yes.
feel like there are a lot of different things that we actually truly need but don't prioritize, right?
Mm,
Like we should know how to one, be in positions that provide actual benefits to us. And I
mm-hmm.
think that the whole show world, there's a portion of shows that actually, and portion of companies that actually will provide those spaces and those benefits, right? So my eyes specifically are fixated upon Cirque. I would
Okay.
love to be a part of Cirque just due to the fact that one, it's a space in which you actually really get to exercise your artistry.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times they're hiring specialty acts. You get solos, duos,
Yep.
specific things that are focused and hyper focused upon what you bring to the table, right? They want those extraordinary artists to be a part of their shows. So if I am going to work as
Mm-hmm.
a dancer out here, right, I'm trying to also think, okay, what environment would be healthy for me? And in totality, too, not
Yeah.
just the dancing aspect. I don't want to just like brute force my way through life. And plus, with shows, you get a lot of strain on the body. So I'm like,
Right.
you know
Right.
what? Something that also provides and extends more to me than just the I guess the stability plus the paycheck, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, I'm looking for something that's like the total package. So for me, I'm going to be out here being patient, auditioning for like I guess higher end shows and
Okay.
wanting to work with higher end companies just so that way it's like, man, I can create a quality lifestyle for myself around this and surrounding
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up because I feel like that's another aspect of getting old, right? Is like
Hmm.
you start to realize like as much as I'd like to, maybe not. For me honestly it's as much as I would not like to. Like I don't want to teach dance
Hmm.
or I don't want to do anything for the rest of my life. Like that does not sound super enjoyable to me. Like I want to
Absolutely.
have that outlet, but I don't want to have to be like 60 years old and like still grinding away like cuz I
Yeah,
didn't
dude.
prepare myself. And so it's funny again, it's like that comparison thing. Like I just
Mhm.
got life insurance for the first time, which is
Let's
like
go.
I know, right? It's
Come
like the
on.
weirdest thing, but it's like it's like those little things that I'm starting to think about now, where it's like, okay, I need to start focusing on this. So I feel you on that concept of
Mhm.
like it's great to hope that something massive will happen and you'll be like this multi-millionaire and never have to worry again. But it's like there's also that little part of me that's like maybe I should prepare a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true. That's so great too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Oh
so I've
man.
been seeing a lot of this content that you're pumping out in the past few weeks since moving to Vegas. So a week,
Mhm.
maybe a little longer.
A little longer, yeah, about a week and
Okay.
a half, so really fresh, really, really fresh.
Yeah. And it feels like like you already have like a nugget of people that you are surrounding yourself
Mm,
with.
yeah.
Is that something that you do like wherever you try to go? Do you try to find that group of people where you mesh, or is it kind of just
Mm.
fly by the seat of your pants and see what happens?
That's a great question. And I think it comes back to intentionality, right? Being able to say, hey, my intention is to surround myself with people who are greater than I am, right? And
Mm,
people that are inspiring and people that are serving others, people that are empowering, people are doing that are doing a lot of things linear to where I'd like to be, right?
right.
And being able to, I guess, be mindful of who you share energy with and where you exert yourself and the whole idea of input and output, right?
Mm,
um, I'm able to create more honest output and authentic output if I'm surrounded by an environment that pushes me, holds
mm,
me accountable, challenges me to be greater every single day, kind of like, 1 foot forward every single day, no matter what it is, even if it's a big failure, like you're just moving forward always because
mhm.
you have a surrounding in which you're immersed within love. And
Yeah.
so to answer the question, yeah, I'm very very specific of whom I'm spending time with. And I'm so blessed that I have one of my crew's hybrids is based out of Vegas. That's actually who my roommates are, Joey and Reese. Shout out to
Mhm.
hybrids, was good. And being around them has been infectious in all the right
Mm,
ways. And it's just their drive, their passion for life, their tenacity within their work ethic in general. These
mhm.
are all qualities that I strive to grow within on a daily basis, so it wouldn't make sense for me to just fly by the seat of my pants and just be like, you know what, I'm just literally going to shed my energy everywhere and anywhere because that actually might taint it in the long run, right? And that actually also might become exhausting for my my lifestyle, So
Mm.
in essence, I think that's also just like obviously knowing boundaries and being able to set those
Yeah.
and create an environment that's positive and impactful for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I just completely lost my train of thought, but it was so good. It was, like, right on the money with what you were talking
That's
about.
how it goes. That's how it goes, dude.
Yo, this has been a thing lately. Now that I got it. I found it. Okay. Yeah, I think it's like hearing you say that is almost like this click of I think a lot of people see what you do and the way you move and just like your approach to dance as a whole
Mhm.
and would almost think not the opposite but would think that you err on more of the side of like here I am, like everyone have
Mm,
me, and like this sort of like open, like just free spirited. And not to say that
yeah.
you don't have that facet of your personality, but I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you have worked on finding that balance of like being really
Mhm.
intentional with the way you move, not just
Yeah.
in dance, but like in life, but
Yeah.
also allowing yourself to still play and be free and have that like creative aspect.
100%. 100%. It's interesting because I spend a lot of my time around other artists. And, I, especially as an educator, as a teacher, which I'm blessed to be in that position. And I take it very seriously. I understand that also, being like a kindred, free, open spirit, like,
Hmm.
I do need to make sure that there's also those days where I focus purely on input, right?
Mm,
So that way I'm actually going internal, I'm spending time alone, I'm recharging because I've always been the type of human to just give as much as I possibly can.
yeah.
I've always been like, you need the shirt off my back, take the shirt off my back.
Hmm.
You need food. You want a free class. If you can't pay for privates, come take. Classes are usually by donation, like just
Hmm.
anything and everything to give back because that's my greater purpose, is to serve. But with that comes self respect and self love, right?
Mm,
I can't serve from an empty cup. As
yep.
cliche as that sounds, it's very spot on. I can't do the work if I don't have that time to myself. So that's where, as I've grown older over the past few years, I've really started to like hone in where my energy needs to be
Mm,
uh, channeled, and then I've been able to learn how to separate myself from other things that distract me or are detrimental to my overall environment, even if it is just one level of my environment that's
right.
impacted that can impact the total. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, I think you can tell that just from like, I mean, one that the people that you, Joey and Reese, we'll use their names because you already
Okay.
said them, and respectfully, Joey and Reese,
Yeah.
they're
Yep.
nasty, like they're crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think like you do a good job of choosing people that are. I think it's easy. It's easy for someone in your position to find people that are not as good as you.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
like not in like, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to anyone else, but it's
Right.
easy when you are like a top tier freestyle artist to find people that also freestyle but are,
Right.
less further along in their journey than you are.
Hmm.
So I think like you do a good job of finding people that are at or above your level consistently
Yeah.
and surrounding
Well.
yourself with those people, and then it's like you're just constantly elevating. And I think if anyone that's listening to this that is a dancer, if you haven't been in an environment with people that are as good or better than you,
Hmm.
it's so hard to explain. It's like one of those
Yeah.
unexplainable things of like, because it's I feel like it's the only time when your growth happens without you inherently having to do anything. You're not
Yes.
doing a technique or you're not doing a specific style of training. You're
Hmm.
just trying to keep up or
Yep.
be at the same pace. And that just naturally like catapults you into completely
Hmm.
new spaces.
100%. And that trait, if you can think that way and place yourself in those positions earlier on, depending on, and I mean, I guess it's not depending on anywhere where you're at currently, right? You can always shift your environment and surround yourself with greater individuals. Um, I think that that is a great way to one step into more discomfort, but
Mm,
in an intentional way. So there's a growth mindset there. Like I'm going to step into this space. I'm going to leave my ego at the door because your
mhm.
ego, when you're around people who are greater than you, your ego is going to come in quite often. Like, damn, we're back to that comparison
Yeah,
mindset,
yeah,
or like,
yeah,
oh
yeah,
man, I was a big fish in this pond, but this is the ocean now.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
it's all about checks and balances. But I think that that's a great step for anyone in any any lane in which you're occupying. Always surround yourself with equal or greater people,
mhm,
and that instills so many wonderful traits into you as well.
yeah,
Like habitually now I'm being held accountable more than ever because I'm around people like Joey and Reese. I'm around the John Boogs. I'm around, X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, that's why I also am so able always to just kind of get in the car and go because I know the environment in which I'm going to is actually one that's going to disrupt my peace. And it's going
mhm,
to push me into a space of uh, discomfort in which I
yeah.
will actually grow, you
You
know?
took the my next prompt out of my
Oh,
brain.
shoot.
Well, no, what I was gonna say is like, because I mean, you've already talked about how you move around a lot, you've traveled a lot, and I think a lot of people that my audience in particular is dancers who are um they might be still in studio or they're still in that high school like college age, and like at that point they're
Mhm.
making a ton of decisions on what do I do and where do I go, and you haven't
Right,
necessarily taken like the um LA and dance and music videos or New York and dance on Broadway route, but you have taken
right.
routes very very similar. And what
Yes.
is like, what do you feel like that's what it is? What is the driver that allows you to just pick up and go without really
Mm.
thinking about it? Or do you think about it? Is it something as free as just going?
Yes and no. I think about it and then I can't think about it any longer or else I'll second guess it, right? But it's
Mm,
it's interesting if you can take more leaps of faith. If you just jump, you know, you're at least working towards, because especially if it's a leap of faith, you're working towards something you love,
mhm,
hopefully, right?
mhm,
You're taking this risk to find your roots somewhere new. And I feel like that requires obviously a level of thought because you need to be uh, aware of what you're getting into,
mm,
but it also can't require too much thought because then, yes, the conscious is. the self-conscious is gonna kick in, and
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have like those inner quarrels and inner distractions pop up, and then
Yep.
you might actually land in that place not fully present.
Mm.
So there's like this level of like, okay, I've made the decision. Intuition is guiding me. I have
Yeah.
universal signs I'm supposed to leap, and I'm going to do it, right? Even if I leap and I fail, I at least practice taking the leap. And maybe the repetition of reaching for risk, you might find your way within your respective craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because, you know, my leap is unique to me. So that's exactly why I haven't landed somewhere like Los Angeles or New York
Mm.
specifically for my career,
Right.
due to the fact that I'm like, you know what? You can leap anywhere. You can
Mm.
really make this world your art playground anywhere. You don't
Mm.
have to think about the traditional way because it's already been done. So you're actually leaping after someone else
All right.
instead of just creating your own journey. So for me, it's been a blessing to be able to like actually uproot myself and then reroute myself and find what that all creates for me. And ultimately, like the thing that I'm learning the most is it's just the human experience and
Mm.
how being human and experiencing other cultures, other people, other communities, other art forms, just opening up your palette to many things, how that impacts your art and who you are as a human, first and foremost, how that impacts it so tremendously.
Mm.
And I think that's what life is all about, is like following and chasing that intuition, that dream, that passion to level yourself up as an individual and then take and share those experiences.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, okay, I give all this energy towards this risk with the mindset of giving this risk some sort of structure to then pass that along. So then the next person that takes that leap, if they do want to follow, you can be like, hey, there's some rocks right here that you have to avoid. And there's this that you
Mm.
might need, learning about the experience of the risk is one of the keys.
Yeah. I love that. Um, I had Riley Jackson on, and he talked about like early on in his process, he had this studio, and he lived in the studio, and like it was basically like uh, he was just getting by at that point while he
Mm,
tried to like build something, and it was like it was interesting because when you saw from like at least from my perspective on him, I never even knew that that was a thing. I never knew that
mm,
he had gone through that. Um, I guess what one might consider a low point or a point
right.
of struggle to get to the next phase. So, to
Mm.
whatever extent you're comfortable, was there any sort of point where it was like one of those lows or one of those points where it's like, maybe this isn't for me, or maybe I'm not on the right path, or maybe I should just, go work at Costco and like move on with my
Yeah,
life. Like, was there any point in your process where that happened?
absolutely. Absolutely. It's happened multiple times actually. And it's really interesting because those are actually really defining moments and seasons of our artistic life. And it really tests you to see if you truly love what you're doing, right?
Mm,
Because some may say, you get that 9 to 5 and now you're sacrificing time that could be invested into your art or your business or whatever it may be. However, some might also say that 9 to 5 is what's helping keep the cash flow to create the stability to then
mm,
exercise your art without any expectations or demands, right? Because
right, right.
sometimes those demands surrounding are going to actually create, that might actually cause blocks. That might
Hmm.
actually cause the work to be less
Yep.
authentic due to the fact that you have to do it, not that
Hmm.
you get to do it, right? And it can shift your mindset. So I've dealt with this a few different times, and in each season that this has happened, I've handled it very differently each time. But what I learned ultimately, like, okay, look, if I have a low, first and foremost, identify why. Like step
Mm,
outside of thinking as only a dancer and think about my life in total and what is missing or
yeah.
what is not receiving enough nourishment or time, and learning how to find balance with that. So it's like, okay, look, if I do need to pick up a part time to sustain this dream, then I'm going to do that because my dream is then going to have sort of a backbone. It's going to have an extra pillar to it to support it. And no one can doubt me on that. You know, no one can
Mm,
say anything about that because I'm hustling to then eventually find that financial freedom and stability and lifestyle through my art.
hmm.
So it's temporary, right? You're playing a temporary game for the permanent result to then eventually have your art be something that you can do for a career.
Right.
And it's really interesting. So I actually was in New York, not for Broadway, not for anything like that, but I found myself in New York 2 years ago, January 2 years ago, and I felt like I settled. I think this was
Mm,
like the one time, especially interesting enough, it was at the time where I was like thriving in my dance. Like I felt
right.
so good, and I was just ready to just travel and do and continue to do the things that I was already doing, and I just stopped. And I stopped for a relationship, and the relationship was very powerful. It taught me some really deep lessons, and I'm super grateful for the experience overall. It shaped me into something even greater than I thought I could be. And and yeah, I felt like I started living someone else's dream, which was really interesting. My
Mm,
partner at the time ran a contemporary company, a pre-professional and professional contemporary company, and I jumped straight into it. And being
hmm.
me, the giver, I was like, "Yeah, I'll start teaching the kids, and I'll start working, I'll start giving everything." And next thing
Yeah.
I know, I was no longer pursuing my dream. I wasn't even going to battles, wasn't going to sessions, wasn't going to
Right.
anything. I mean, in essence, I really didn't even get to know anyone in New York. So it
Mm,
was like one of those times where it was like, wow, I completely let someone else's dream become my own,
mm,
which in essence is like what a lot of people think a 9 to 5 is, right? It's like, oh, you're punching
mm,
someone else's clock. So I live that like that negative connotation of a 9 to 5 essentially, just
mm.
through living my dream through someone else, punching their clock, trying to then think that that was where I was supposed to be when in
Yeah. Yeah.
reality I was meant to be there, and I loved the people that I worked with, and I grew tremendously. However, that wasn't my dream. That
Right.
wasn't
Right.
my sense of direction that I needed to go in. So those moments are great times to self-reflect, to return to the root, and then think about how you can reinvent yourself. You know,
Mm,
if you're not in love with your life, that's your life. You have the
yeah.
ability to actually take a step back and be aware of that, be mindful, and then step back in to make change, you know?
Right. Right.
I mean, we definitely are like the captains of our own universe. So it's like you have to shift every time that you feel like you're falling out of love with your art or you're losing balance. You have to find what point is the balance actually being lost at, you know,
Mm,
like, and how do I create counterbalance, or how do I work through that, and how do I reinvent the wheel so that way I can continue to also rekindle my love on a consistent basis for the thing that I do.
mm. Do you think there's like a stigma that I don't love that word, but we're gonna roll with that word because I think it fits. A
Mhm.
stigma around and this isn't this is purely I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I'm not directing this at you, so answer it in
Mhm.
perspective of just all dancers. You
Perfect.
think there's a stigma around high level artists who don't make a living off of their art? And I
1000%.
and there's one more to it, and then I'll let you go. Is like the stigma from both ends, from the artist
Mhm.
and from the consumer of the art. Because I feel like
Mhm.
for me, I felt it from both sides. I felt it from myself, like kind of what you
Mhm.
spoke about, like oh, because I have a salaried position with a company that's outside of
Mhm.
dance, and there's been moments where I feel almost fraudulent in the way that
Mm.
I move, even though I don't inherently say that I make a living and have built this life off of dance, but I
Mhm.
think it's assumed based off of my content. So that,
Mm.
and then also on the flip side, I know for me as a consumer, when I have found out that high level artists that I perceived as being high level had full-time jobs, it was like
Mm.
almost this sort of like world crushing, like, because you put these people on a pedestal of like of of greatness, and then
Mhm.
it's almost in your brain, it's like deteriorated for whatever
Mhm.
reason by the fact that they
Right.
have a job.
Yeah. It's it's crazy because I think, a lot of the artists are looking at each other for examples and saying like, okay, who seems to have it figured out? Who
Right.
is able to have families, homes, cars, all these things, right? And we naturally go, okay, that means, you know, in certain aspects they've made it, right?
Hmm.
And these, superficial thoughts sometimes are what justifies who and who hasn't made it.
Hmm.
Um, and then you hear of, yeah, these stories where artists are like, "No, I don't even dance as a career. I'm
Right.
actually flourishing as an artist because I don't work
Right.
as an
Right.
artist,"
Right.
right? And then you also hear those artists that, work and actually do make a very sustainable lifestyle. They have salaries, they have the savings, they have, the 401ks and X, Y, and Z. And, they're fully immersed and working as an artist and they love it as well.
Mm.
So it's interesting because, like, uh, you know, a lot of people just think that the grass is greener on the other side. So they see these heavy hitters in the art world and they just assume that because they're so good at what they do that that's actually what they do for a living.
Mm.
And I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's important to, think about the artist specifically, like what is it that they do? Because we
Hmm.
see the product, but we don't see behind the scenes for the most
Yeah.
part. So it's like the ability to say like, okay, I might look at X dancer as an example for someone who I think has it figured out. But then when I actually talk to them, they also direct, they do ad work, they're great with business management and marketing.
Mm.
They have
Mm.
passive income, they're investing in crypto, they're doing 10 other things
Hmm.
in order to
Yep.
create that lifestyle. And then their art just seems to be the thing that they share mostly to the world.
Yeah.
You see that often. And so for me, it's like, whether there's a stigma or not, there's also no wrong or right way. And there's also
Yeah.
no
Yeah. Yeah.
one artist that's doing it the perfect way. There's no
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah.
example out there, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I hesitate every time, like with using the word stigma, just because I feel like it insinuates like negativity.
True.
And I more so mean like just exactly what you were saying. Like there's this perception almost of
Mhm.
that being the case. And I think I'm like listening and thinking about this in the grander scheme of things. And uh where it's taking me in my head is like when I was younger, you only came across really high level artists in specific situations.
Right.
You'd go to I'll use very industrial just because it's what I'm familiar with. So you'd
Mhm.
go to a concert and you see a backup dancer and you're like, wow, this is an amazing artist.
Right.
Obviously they're getting paid money to be doing this. Or
Mhm.
you go to a dance convention and you see a teacher and you're like, wow, they're obviously getting paid to do this. So you almost had this like innate drive because you only saw these people in pockets of
Mhm.
your journey. And I constantly as an educator and just as someone in this space am searching for the answers that probably don't exist of why uh I feel like overall motivation amongst younger artists has declined.
Mm.
And now it's
Interesting.
almost making me think like, is it possible that it's because we're seeing these high level artists all the time outside of these really specific moments? And I want to explain it more of like you see a really high level artist on TikTok,
Yep.
you don't see anything else, and then we as the consumer make the assumption that because they're at that high level they're getting paid to do that,
Mhm.
where in reality that may not be the case. That could be the complete
Yep.
opposite. This person could be really struggling and you wouldn't know because you're seeing them in this highlighted sort of view.
Right.
And so I can only imagine that as like a younger dancer, you're seeing that and you're like, oh, like everyone that's great is making money. And
Yep.
it's just not, I mean, it's not the case. I think like what people sometimes misunderstand is like the amount of dancers that are making, like, I'm going to use what you said, that have savings, have a this, have that, is far and few, like very, very slim.
It's crazy.
And so, but that's not the narrative that you get. And I hate to use that cliche of like everyone posts a positive and yada yada yada, but like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
narrative that younger dancers are seeing
Right.
at this point in time.
Right. And I think that, the younger generation sees this, and especially with the conversation of the internet in general and being able to spread information so easily,
Mm.
the market essentially is now 100 times as saturated as it was a decade ago, So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so it's more saturated. You have these perfect posts being made and
Hmm.
formulated, right?
Yep.
And you have this perception, then your younger generation dancer now tries to follow that.
Hmm.
And because the market's so saturated and they're not necessarily at that level, then in turn they don't get the viewers, they don't get, the recognition. And, in a lot of the younger generation, and even in our generation and the generation before us, and so on, we're seeking validation with our art. It feels
Hmm.
good to get those things, right? But when
Yep.
we don't receive that, and we don't receive that on a regular basis, psychologically, now I'm thinking that I'm not worth anything,
Mm.
And then as a younger dancer, it's like, man, I see this picture perfect image of this artist, and I know I have that in me,
Yeah.
but now I'm defeated because the world hasn't actually, given me that
Mm.
same attention. But it's interesting because a lot of people look directly at social media for face value and don't actually
Yep.
think about all the countless hours behind it. It's
Yeah.
like, you hear the saying all the time, if you make something look easy, it's because you've put thousands of hours in to make it that way, right?
Yeah.
You've put
Yeah.
in the work, you've put in the 10,000 hours, and you've really learned the skill set. And I think right now, even playing the social media game and having my business be primarily based and rooted on social media,
Hmm.
and being able to be in that position, I have to check myself too,
Yeah.
and it's something to be like, you know what, like there's so much work that needs to be done behind the scenes to even get to that level. And because I understand those factors, then I'm able to separate myself from comparison, and then I can find true inspiration instead of going to watch these videos or watch other dancers, especially
Hmm.
because the high level ones are everywhere now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Instead of leading by their example, I start to create my own example. I start to create my own standard for myself, and I work towards that, right? Maybe that's a goal instead of it being like I need to be there and rush to that point, right? Um, that could be a 5 to 10 year goal, be at a level of another artist, and say
Yeah.
I can do that, but I know that I need to train. I know that I need to go to class. I know that I need to not rely on these platforms to provide me the validation and all those extra things. So yeah, it's interesting. I couldn't agree more with that. Like the younger generation is definitely like more defeated easier and more
Hmm.
often.
Hmm. Do you feel like you still get caught in those sort of like validation loops when it comes to social media?
I think the one loop that I get caught in is when I like really put my heart into something. I might like for example, let's use one of our videos
Yeah.
for this. We create the piece with Apollo, right?
Hmm.
So it's us
Hmm.
three. We get this dope venue. We choreographed it. You did amazing on just the entirety of the project. It's so artistic and so meaningful, and
Hmm.
that's one of my least viewed videos I've ever posted.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm just like, okay. So is it the product that matters, or is it the process that matters? And
Mm,
it's always the process. It's the journey, not the
mm,
destination. So you just
mm.
take that, you take those words away, you fill in the
Yeah.
blank. It's the process and the product. And every once in a while, because I care about it, I
Yeah.
expect others to care about it, and that's not
Yep.
reality. And so that's for me, that's where social media checks me and allows me to actually in like in a healthy way, it allows me to separate from it because I'm like, you know what? I might love every ounce of this project, and that's enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
I can post it and walk away from it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, all of the content that I've been doing recently, um, it's all just on my phone. I record it
Yeah.
like 5 minutes before I go into work in my car, and it's like I caption it on the way to the door of my job, and then it's posted by
Mhm.
the time I get to my desk. And it's like it's infuriating because I have all of this fantastic gear and like all of this stuff, and it's like nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's purely just the content. But it's so weird how it works because then you see and I'm just gonna use them as an example because I think people have seen them a lot, but you see like this style of video that like Enola and Slavic and some of these other dancers do.
Hmm.
And it's very highly produced
Hmm.
and crushes, but it's like then when you do something similar, it's like it doesn't. So it's like that's I think what the hardest part is
Yeah.
for me is like um yeah, you'll put so much effort into something, but you also will hear these stories sometimes of like you know, like a video like that where it's something that a lot of people didn't see, but the one person that needed to see it saw it. And then it was
1000%.
like that opened the door for so many other opportunities. So I think it's like
Hmm.
it's constantly reminding myself of that too, that like as much as I know this ruins the psychology of my brain, I have to
Hmm.
move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have
Yeah.
to just move on, create the next thing, and forget about that because in 24 hours nobody cares anyways. And it's like
100%.
on to the next thing. So it's like, yeah, yeah, I feel that too. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, yeah.
Well, even just to add like a little more to that too, as a creative, you're hopefully already working on the next thing by the time you even post the previous thing,
Mm,
right? The
right.
previous thing was made in the past at that point. When you
Mm,
posted it, that's not the start of the creation, right?
mm.
It's already been done.
I
So
love
if
that.
anything,
I love
being
that.
being being able to share that now is just like the cherry on top. But the whole you had the whole sundae, you had the whole ice cream sundae already. Like you're already satiated from that. So
Yeah.
you should be using that energy to then keep that rolling, right? And it's
Mm,
interesting once you snowball like that, your artistry develops so quickly because you're putting yourself in challenging environments and you're not seeking to get that, that final product
mm.
in someone's hands. You're not
Yeah,
saying like,
yeah.
this is for you, this is for you, this is for you. I'm going to somehow get viewership from this, or maybe someone's going to see this or not. You're not creating for that reason anyway.
Yeah,
Hopefully not,
yeah.
right? You're not, and that's the greatness of creating from a pure and authentic place, because that's now where it will actually be impactful.
Mm,
Because in a world of a 15-second algorithm, a spoon-fed nature that's being driven to us on the daily, you're kind of that blip, you're that glitch in the system when you post meaningful art, right? You don't
mm,
conform, and in that, that's a great way of exercising who you authentically are as an
mm.
artist, right? You step further into your purpose the more you defy the norm, not the more that
Right.
you follow it. So it's already been created, let it go, just let it go, and it goes boop, straight onto the phone, it's gone, you don't have to think about it anymore, it's posted, and now
Mm.
you're already cultivating something new.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That was great. You crushed that.
Thanks, dude.
Um, what are you struggling with now like right now, um, with dance? And
Ooh.
you can take that personally, or if like there's something within dance that you're like frustrated with, but what is like, because I mean, I feel like we always have our shit, with like every aspect of everything. Like, what is it
Right.
right now that like you feel is a struggle point?
Ooh. I have a couple. One is actually outside of the dance, but it's affecting my dance,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can kind of relay that back in.
That.
Injury.
Mm,
And this is one of the greatest things that I'm struggling with right now, but it's also one of the most humbling experiences and most healing experiences because it's
mm.
making me turn into my body more. I dislocated my shoulder in New York mountain biking, actually,
Oh
and
shit.
this has been sort of like a lingering thing
Yep.
for about 2 years at this point, and my shoulder has a tremendous amount of inflammation after every session of dance.
Mm,
Um, and so it's making me really focus on my body a lot
mm.
more when it comes to even just simple stretching, having a regular rhythm in which I can operate within, like really dialing in my circadian rhythm actually has a pretty profound effect on my body, which is,
Mm.
I mean, natural, right? We should create a
Yeah.
natural rhythm for ourselves. And this injury is humbling me because it's limiting my movement by a certain point within every one of my sessions.
Mm.
So by the time I'm 45 minutes in, even though I've warmed up properly and done PT and done all these different things, and I mean, I even go get chiropractic work done, I get deep tissue work done. All of
Yeah.
this has stemmed from this injury because this injury is limiting and it's teaching me like, hey, you want to be here for, another 45, 50, 60 years, whatever it may be, you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
create during that time, you do. So you need to take better care of yourself, or
Mm-hmm.
else what you love can be stripped away from you at any moment. And it's
Yeah.
crazy when
Yeah.
when you become a prisoner of your own body.
Mm.
It's like, dude, I'm limited, like to the point to where I can't raise my arm above shoulder height 45 minutes into my session.
That's
So it's like
crazy.
my threshold has shrunken. And
Yeah.
in that, it's interesting because my biggest challenge that I face is that ego kicking in saying that my practice is not worthwhile anymore. And it's
Mm.
and in the sense, and I guess like to compare to the point to where I used to train anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of quality, there's a lot of study going on, there's a lot of different facets of the sessions that I would get into, and I'm missing out on a lot of that now.
Mm.
I don't have the same duration of time in which I can actually truly and physically work through things that I want to work on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so injury has been a huge, huge trial. And I feel like I'm slowly triumphing, because I am allowing myself to listen to the injury. I'm
Yeah.
allowing myself to lean into the recovery side more than I am working on output and the physicality of everything. And then I'm taking a lot of time to go inward to really remind myself, like, this is something that I can make it through. It's not permanent, it's
Mm.
temporary. If I do this correctly and I respect my body and I respect and give my injury love, then I can actually make it through it and not
Yeah.
cause further issues. So right now is actually probably the most challenging because I've never had an injury like this before in my life. Like
Mm.
thankfully, and I know I'm gonna make it through this. However, man, it tests all facets. It tests everything,
Yeah.
mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. That
Yeah,
sucks.
dude.
Like, that's terrible.
It's and it's
Shoulders
and
are the worst.
it's like your joints, right? Your major
Yeah.
joints that,
Yeah.
you break a wrist, you sprain an ankle, you pop a shoulder out, and next thing you know, like your entirety of existence has
Mhm.
to work around that one area and you
Mhm.
feel it constantly. But in a way, yes, it is terrible, but in a way it's also terrific
Yeah.
because if I didn't get injured, I probably would have pushed myself to do something more severe to my body because at that
Mm.
time I wasn't I didn't have a self-care routine. I didn't take
Yeah.
time to warm up and cool down because I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
so constant. And I thought that I needed to just continue to go and go and go. In essence, it taught me the balance of rest within the creative process and
Hmm.
how that's actually, to me, at least in my own experience, that's 50% of the pie.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
half of it to me. If I don't,
Yeah.
once again, going back to what we were talking about earlier too, input versus output. Currently, I need to have balance and prioritize input before I can even think about output.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's made me check, because now that 45 minutes is quality. It's pure
Yeah.
quality.
You betcha it
I
is.
I bro, you bet your bottom dollar. Come on. Like I'm so excited to move for those 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
so excited to then like shake all that off and melt all that tension off post and just like reflect on it and build. And it's
Mm,
making me just, it's rekindling a love for my body that I didn't know I had.
yeah. 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 That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I have to stretch now too.
Let's
Yeah.
go. Come on.
Yeah. That's you get old and you can't just, you can't just go for it anymore.
No, no full sends. No full sends, bro. I got to mark it from like 10 to 20 to
Yeah.
30 to 40. Like I got to build up.
I'm telling you, my kids make fun of me for it when I'm at convention. I'm like full stretch routine. I have like my foam roller and shit. And they're like, they just laugh at me. I'm like, you know, you'll be here one day.
You're like, I'll see you soon. We'll
You'll
see
be
you
here.
soon here. There's a
You'll turn
space
it.
right next to me.
You'll turn 18 and it'll hit you real hard that you can't
Oh
just.
man. It's definitely like, that's why I also think as younger artists, since they can learn so much so quickly,
Yeah.
I think the value of educating yourself on your recovery process
Mm,
is really, really key. Like understanding what the body actually needs to really kind of optimize the experience of the body. And the experience of dance is so tremendously impactful on the body in
yeah.
like both
Yeah.
positive and negative ways. It's exhausting to express, your body fully uh, within all of these spaces consistently every
Yeah.
single day,
Yep.
and not actually take time to, you know, reciprocate that to your body. You're giving so much love and energy outward that you also need to remember that you need to do that twice as much inward. And a lot of
Hmm.
these dancers, hopefully, they don't end up on the mat next to us when they're like 18 years old,
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
years old, and stretch and
Yeah.
foam rolling and all that. Hopefully they do that prior so they don't have to do that all the time from now on.
Okay, this is we'll do this as the last one. So hopefully we'll keep it brief. I know that you're brief with this in general, so I think you'll give a really quality answer that won't be diluted at all.
Okay.
How do you balance the politics of dance versus just the dance?
Oof.
Because you are really good at this. I am not.
Yeah.
You are really good at this. Like the one thing that I for sure have learned about you is that you somehow walk this like tiny invisible line of like you care, and I know you care because you're a passionate artist,
Mhm.
but you don't, at least outwardly facing, it doesn't seem like it affects you super deeply.
Yeah, it really doesn't when you actually step back to try to understand the whole picture and understand where the politics are coming from.
Mm,
I think that if we're speaking specifically on dance politics and how you see them kind of almost anywhere you go, whether it
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
from auditions
yeah,
to
super
battles
vague.
to sessions to all of that, right?
Hmm.
It's interesting because if you can learn to identify when they're happening and identify the factors that are causing the politics to happen, then you're more so like an understanding of the situation,
Mm,
and you can remove emotion from the situation and be rational and say, you know what, like at the end of the day, my art is my art. That audition, they were looking for someone specific. That
hmm.
judge only has this lens when it comes to dance.
Mm,
Or, maybe it's not political once you actually start understanding it. Like
mm.
sometimes maybe you did just take a fat L, right? And you need to
Yeah, yeah,
take
yeah,
it
yeah,
and
yeah,
understand it.
yeah,
So ultimately, like stepping back to really try to understand the situation in its
yeah,
entirety is really important.
yeah.
So, and I guess knowing what you're signing up for is
Mm,
part of that understanding. So, like, let's say I'm entering a popping battle and I know that my style of popping is not traditional. and I have three judges who are very traditional,
Mm,
um, and they're going to be, you know, the ones viewing my art.
yeah.
I can't be upset when they don't vote for me.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like I can't, if they're looking for a 5'10", thin, toned, muscular type for this gig behind this artist, and I'm 5'7", I'm like, well, I don't meet that 5'10" thing right off the bat, you know, so it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
woe is me. It's like I understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
Then when it is just straight, I guess, like BS and the politics are heavy, you know, by practicing this level, I guess, of like mindfulness and awareness of where they're coming from in general, when some BS happens, you can also help separate yourself from it a little bit
Yeah.
easier because you know
Yeah.
it's not you. That's the thing. So yeah, politics are an interesting thing to navigate, but I just literally like have never really paid them too much attention because I feel like
Mm,
it ultimately they distract from the purpose of whatever you're doing anyway.
yeah. See, I knew you'd have a good answer.
Yes.
Well,
I
and I
I
think I think
I
too,
started
like,
getting, a little sweaty, bro. You put that expectation on me.
no, 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 it was great. But
Nah,
I
just
think
kidding.
too, like you talked about ego like earlier on, and I think as you get older, the one thing that I've noticed is like you you create this division between like your ego and like the rest of you, I guess. I feel like
Mhm,
when you're younger, it's like especially as an artist, you're heavily led by
mhm,
ego. And
100%.
so when you get older and you start to separate the two, it's easier to look at a situation and be like, okay, I just sucked at that moment in
Yeah.
time. Or like, you know, that round was just terrible and that person was
Mhm,
better than me. Or like in a competition setting, like maybe it wasn't because they dance at this studio. Maybe they just are actually good. But I feel
mhm,
like when you're younger, it's harder to kind of like navigate that because again, that
100.
that ego is like driving a lot more of your
Mhm.
decision making and your processing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're still in essence, when you're younger too, you're still finding who you are as an artist, and there's, like, this level of, like, as you're going through these seasons of change, there's this level of acceptance. You start
Mm,
to recognize, you know, oh, this person liked that version of me. Perfect. I'm going to try that again. And then the next person might not like that version of you. And then
yeah.
you like, okay, I got to go back to the drawing board. And you got to learn from these political moments. And then, yeah, eventually you start to actually find clarity in them. And you take your L's, you take your W's, and they're all the same. You
Yeah.
learn from all of
Yeah.
it, you know? And also that's, I think, circling back to just the environment, knowing what you're getting into. That's the key. Because
Mm,
once you understand, you can also make a decision if you're like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to be um, in this space of
yeah.
judgment,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I'm going to allow myself to enter this with no expectations.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, if anything is to happen, good or bad, it's actually just it just sort of becomes what it is. You know, it
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
it is, and you don't necessarily have to validate yourself or belittle yourself in these situations because it doesn't really seem like when something political really happens that there's maybe a mid ground. It's usually like you either feel some type of way about it or you don't care at all.
Hmm.
It's not like I'm kind of bothered by that. You're either
Yeah.
bothered by it or you're not, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's and then you have to ask yourself why. Is it
Mm,
a me thing or is it you know, just the name of the game,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Amazing. Okay. I always ask for like a last little nugget. So what's your I mean, an up and coming artist, what's the what would you tell them looking back on from point A to where you are now? Um,
Mm,
you know, what is that thing that stands out the most?
man, I would say pay your dues,
Mm,
respect whatever culture you're in to the fullest, understand what space you're supposed to be in and what space you occupy in that culture. If it's, you know, if it's something that you truly love, you'll hopefully do that naturally. You'll pay homage to the people who created things and you pay homage to those that are currently doing it. You'll give more than you take.
mm,
Um, and while you're going on that journey, wherever that takes you, really focus on finding who you are in all
mm,
of this. I think it's sort of like this experience of etching out the thumbprint over time until you finally are able to unlock that version of yourself, right?
Mm,
And as you etch that out while doing it, responsibly, respectfully, you'll build a world with your art that is actually a world that you want to be in and you want to be
mm,
a part of. You're not just going to follow someone else's dream or mold yourself to a model that doesn't serve you or that you're being told that you have to be a part of. You
mm.
should get to experience your art and you should get to experience who you truly are in that. So, focusing on finding that sense of identity and once you find that, running with it as long as you possibly can, because once you find who you are, that's where your superpowers start to show. That's where
Mm.
you're able to flourish as not only as an artist but as a human too, because then with identity comes self-love, respect, boundaries,
Mm.
knowing your worth, knowing where to exercise your space of artistry, knowing input versus all the things we talked about really
Yeah.
rely and relay back to knowing who you actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. Boom.
Boom.
Fire.
Come on, man.
So good. So good. That's it.
That's it.
That was it. You crushed it.
Yes.